Back in freshman year, we had an assignment to write a summary and movie idea and a script for one scene for that movie idea. I wrote and had the idea for a movie about a gay high school student in Nazi Germany. I got really invested in the project. I did a whole bunch of research. Some of the stuff I found out I did include and some I didn't even include. But I did research to make sure that I understood the context of what was going on at the time and how those issues were approached by people in the LGBT community. Since then, I've also wanted to write something else socially charged, namely about race. And I haven't because I know that I don't know enough, and I know that I'm not educated enough in the topic in order to do so. As part of the research that I wanted to do for this, I decided that one of the best things to do would be to interview people of color or people in immigrant families in order to understand more about the experience. What's your name?
My name is Wanting Yu.
My name is Bobby Jean Hall.
I'm Killian Chu.
My name is Amrit Wanasundar.
My name is Jelani Stewart.
So I'm Chinese. Both my parents were born in China.
I identify as Afro-Latinx. My mother is Puerto Rican. My mother, her grandparents, the whole side of my family is Puerto Rican.
I don't really have a whole label other than mixed race. My mom is from Honduras and my dad is Asian American. He's Japanese and Chinese.
I am Sri Lankan and American. So my parents moved from Sri Lanka to America in 1984.
My mom is African American and my dad is Trinidadian.
How have your parents preserved their culture after having moved to America?
I think that I can see this a lot in the food that we eat.
A lot of the food that we eat,
But a lot of that is mixed in with American style foods we eat. And I guess it can sort of be seen as a metaphor for how our culture is preserved.
Things we watched. Speaking from my dad's side, when I did visit him because he lives in Texas, that's how he kind of like kept me invested and connected to my like roots.
You can also see that in how my parents speak Chinese to me, but oftentimes I'll respond in English, or like a Chinglish with mixed Chinese in the words that I say to them.
Honestly, I wouldn't say that my parents do a lot to keep Native culture a huge part of my life, but keeping in touch with family, it's been a little difficult, especially having two parents that have such different cultures. It's been a struggle for me to reconcile my identity, keeping in touch with my roots, and also being very much like an American teenager.
I think maintaining the culture was a very important thing for them. A lot of our friends come from Sri Lanka. A lot of immigrant parents like to teach their kids how to speak their native language. Mine never really forced it upon me, but naturally, from what I've heard, I can say a couple of things here and there.
My mother really made it important that I learned to be fluent in Spanish and that I read, wrote, and spoke it. I've been going to outdoor salsa parties and concerts for literally as long as I could remember. Like, my mother used to take me in a carriage to South Street Seaport for the big concerts, that huge stage, and like music blasting, and there are people, drunk people, old people, everybody. I can dance a lot of the Hispanic styles. I feel like I have a really good grasp on the Hispanic parts of me.
When I was little, my dad and my grandma took me to a Shichigo-san festival in Japan. It's like a coming of age celebration. At 3, 5, and 7, children will dress in ceremonial clothing, and there's like a music part to it. I remember going to the salon and getting my hair done and getting the kimono fitted. It was a lot of fun.
Do you think it is important to preserve different cultures through different generations?
I think so.
Oh, for sure.
People's cultures are so important.
I do. I think preserving culture is important because it reminds us where we come from and our historical significance, in a sense.
I think it's important to just sort of know about yourself. I don't think it's necessarily keeping it alive. Like, I don't think my mom was very concerned about making her culture a huge part of my life, just to like keep the some kind of lineage going. I
do also think, though, some traditions should evolve because our institutions evolve, and we should evolve with our institutions.
Teaching people about the power that they have is really important because people forget these imperialized cultures used to be super reverent. And I think it's important to pass that knowledge on. When the slaves were brought over from Africa, there was a whole whitewashing of the culture, the shaving of the head, breaking people apart on purpose for the language barrier and stuff like that. That's why I think 23andMe and like all those DNA things are so important, because people are trying to trace back to their roots and like learn about who they were before.
Have you faced discrimination?
Yes, not as much as some of like my brothers and people that I know.
I think I've been pretty lucky.
I am on the luckier side. I don't remember that I've experienced any like pointed discrimination or prejudice.
I wouldn't say that I've experienced any like racism.
I've never been, looked down upon because of my race, I'm very grateful for that. I mean, people will make jokes. I think discrimination is a very harsh way of putting it. I've never been discriminated.
Stupid like racial remarks or something. I remember interviewing someone and then after like walked away, and then I heard like a brief comment about like, oh my god, did you see her eyes? Like they were so small. I've had people say my name weirdly, and like overemphasize. I think that like stereotypes are something that I face a lot.
Something actually happened recently. I was racially profiled in a Burberry store. So basically, I was just followed around the store, and I noticed I was the only one being followed.
There's the stereotype that Chinese people are great at math or very, very intelligent. Their grades are super high, and that's something that I've definitely seen associated with me and other Chinese people that I know.
And of course, that's very, very inappropriate, and it made me feel extremely uncomfortable.
That has been like overemphasized in a way that has made me uncomfortable.
There have been like microaggressions. They'll stay out in the sun too long. And I'm like, when I would tell people that I was Puerto Rican, they'd attribute the fact that I have hair to my Puerto Rican culture. Once I came into this world, I've been affected by systemic racism and institutionalized racism.
What do you think can be done in terms of how future generations are brought up in order to prevent racism and discrimination from being as much of a problem as it is now or it has been in the past?
I think media representation is really, 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 really important.
And what people see in the media.
Having deep dialogue on like huge platforms, having representation, having inclusivity within our Hollywood media culture. I'm an actor, so I kind of like live in that realm.
Education is always important. It provides perspective.
I feel that education is everything.
Even if you're white, I think it's even a little necessary to just sort of have that baseline knowledge of other people.
The concept of learning and being open to learning constantly. People are what they learn. You're not born racist. You're taught these things and they're ingrained in your mind, and even if they're not being explicitly said, it's like subliminal message. So I feel there needs to be better education starting at home,
because like prejudice is still a very, very like widespread and common thing, and I think that by preserving culture and like in some ways normalizing different cultures, that can at the very basis reduce prejudice a little bit.
Normalization, that is so big right now. I feel like normalizing that it's okay to wear your natural hair at work or to an interview or to something that's supposed to be a special occasion, scarves and do-rags.
Is there anything that you feel like should be brought up that I may not have asked a question about, just like anything in general?
Especially now with the pandemic and that it originated in China. My dad has been yelled at by some stupid high schoolers because he's Chinese. I've talked to a Chinese restaurant owner who has been yelled at for his race. It's definitely less something that I've experienced myself, but something that I'm aware of and careful about.
Intersectionality is so important, but addressing systemic issues. There's one experience for a Black cis man in America, and then there's one experience for a Black queer man in America, and then there's one for a Black disabled queer man in America. Everybody's experience varies based on their varying identity. In marginalized communities, people are still marginalizing certain groups, and that's like really counteractive. In the queer community, like biphobia is a thing and transphobia is a thing. As marginalized people, we should all stick together. That's something that needs to be addressed when, like, it shouldn't be forgotten when talking about like the LGBTQ plus community or the Black community or the Asian community or the Native American community. Like, there are people who are being forgotten amongst the forgotten.
There was one time I can kind of laugh about it now. It was in middle school. I was talking to some of my friends, and this kid was also there. We were having this conversation. I don't think he was really listening to me, but I had mentioned in passing that, like, oh, I'm Latinx. And he looked at me, he went, no, you're not. And I don't know how to prove to you. It was just so bizarre. I think that because I don't look very Honduran, a lot of people think I'm like Asian, so like white and Asian. I know that I function from a facet of white privilege because sometimes people will perceive me as half white. I know that doesn't invalidate my ethnicity at all, but sometimes it feels like it does.
Being though I am a part of the LGBTQ community, I'm an avid supporter for LGBTQ rights. Let me tie it back into preserving tradition. In the Caribbean, in the West Indies, their attitudes towards the LGBTQ community is negative, to say the least. So it's been a struggle accepting where my bloodline is from and also dealing with who I am as a person and how those two can mesh and mingle. My father had a hard time with me coming out, and I think that was a lot because of where he's from, his tradition. He was ignorant to people of the LGBTQ experience. And being that his son was one of them, it was like, whoa, no, this is not us. This is some new trend or whatever, he said. So just dealing with that type of stuff, helping change the narrative. And that's why I do also think it's important that cultural traditions evolve, especially if they don't serve the interests of humans and humans' rights.
I'm going to be a co-leader for the mixed affinity group in school in an effort to connect with peers who had similar experiences that I do, because like you're drawn to people who are similar to you, but it's difficult to sort of find that solidarity in a like predominantly affluent white school.
I don't think that it's fair to be like, well, people of color should be the ones to like have to rebrand their race or their people across the world. Like, that's not fair. And that's a burden that a lot of Black folks feel that they feel that it's their job to like walk around in a suit all day and like, you know, only speak completely proper English, never drink for sake of, you know, depicting the race in a better light. It isn't fair, you know, that that's the only image of Black folk that'll like change anybody's mind. It shouldn't be that way. We shouldn't have to assimilate to be respected, treated with kindness, because people of color, like anybody else, are, you know, built for kindness and built to be respected.